So this panel is talking about government and communities, our relationships with driving and inspiring research, and then actually, using the outcomes in productive ways. Hongwei gave us a fun set of questions to think about. They're listed here. Let's figure out ways to raise awareness of what government initiatives, particularly those focusing on rural and advanced wireless and broadband, can do to support this research, and what kind of applications in general domains, and then particularly on precision agriculture, because that's a focus of the ARA effort. Can we brainstorm some ideas that would nurture innovation that's focused on rural wireless, and explore how government agencies and programs and academia and industry can help? What are some synergies between far-edge wireless for agriculture and for defense? And can we gather some input from relevant communities? Hongwei also did the same thing in the graphical version on this slide. So we've got a really good set of panelists today who we're going to introduce in reverse alphabetical order. And Brad Hunt, I didn't make it on the slide because he got recruited really late, but it's an excellent win. So in reverse alphabetical order, Brad is second, okay, but Ellen is first. So I've asked each panelist to maybe put together just a short introduction to what their organization does, how it might pertain to the ARA mission. Ellen.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen Zagura. I am the Division Director of Computer and Network Systems, CNS, within the SIZE Directorate at NSF. I suspect most of you don't need too much of an introduction to the mission of NSF, or even to the more specific scoping of SIZE and CNS, but I'll give you just a little bit of it. SIZE is by far the largest funder of academic computer science research in the United States. The number 80% is used in presentations by people who should know what the number is, so I'm going to quote that back to you. And within SIZE, CNS, Computer and Network Systems, is the primary funder of wireless and wired networking research, as well as computer systems and relevant for this group, research infrastructure. So CNS has a little bit of a broad portfolio. It's one of the things that attracted me to coming to NSF a year ago. So wireless and wired networks, computer systems, research infrastructure, and as a matter of fact, also the Secure and Trusted Computing Program, the SATC program. So we really cover quite a lot of the critical research and critical infrastructure that we've touched on over the last day and a half. So the power, and NSF has had an extremely long and successful history with research infrastructure and platforms for networking research. So dating to NSFNet, which ran for about 10 years from 1985 to 1995, to Planet Lab and Genie, now transitioned to be Fabric. All of those really primarily in the backbone wired space. And then about 8 years ago, the vision and decision to invest in wireless platforms, and that's what produced the Power Program, which now funds 4 different, I'd laugh when we call them city scale when we're driving around Iowa. City, take that in, with a big grain of salt here, but 4 city scale wireless platforms, and rolled out over a sequence of years. And don't tell the other platforms, but ARA is my favorite, and that's because in my own research, I've had a more than 30-year career working in networking at Georgia Tech, and I have had a lot of interest in mobile wireless, and especially in reaching far-flung locations. So the kind of headliner of ARA and the commitment to trying to understand and meet the needs of rural communities is one that resonates with my own prior and continuing research agenda. I have to be careful in these settings, which hat I'm wearing. I'm going to resist telling you about my research in mobile wireless measurement, but so NSF's history in funding platforms is long and successful, and this set of wireless investments is sort of the latest in this string. NSF also, of course, funds research to happen on top of platforms and with platforms. So we have multiple funding programs where you can apply for supplements to your work so that you can come and make use of platforms, and also that you can apply for basic research proposals that would help develop, explore, understand how future wireless systems should be built, and with the potential to feed those ideas into platforms. So, and we do more of this work in various government and government partnerships, and more of it with government and industry partnerships. So that's something that in the year I've been at NSF, I've come to appreciate is the kind of the complexity, and I think it's a sign of interest, right? The complexity of the relationships that we try to create so that we can, talk with our other federal partners, industry consortiums, et cetera, to try to all bring together what we can to the table for working on wireless and wireless application areas. The USDA and NIFA has been a fantastic partner to NSF on a number of areas, from wireless to AI and agriculture. So that's a sort of scope of NSF and our both excitement and investment in partnerships, as we'll, I'm sure, be talking about today. So thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Ellen. So I apologize. I asked you to send me a little intro, and then I forgot to introduce you. This is perhaps because I've known Ellen, as she points out, since Genie days, and so yeah, it's been a bit. But Ellen did most of the introducing, but I can do a little bit of the background and the brags, because you don't do those yourself. But as she pointed out, Ellen's on loan from the School of Computer Science at Georgia Tech, so this is a rotating position, at least at CNS. She mentioned her interest in computer networking, mobile and wireless networks, and on ethics education in undergraduate computer science. And Ellen's a fellow both of the IEEE and the ACM, which is relatively cool. So, Ellen, Brett, I can't introduce you. We just met. So, would you mind introducing yourself? I apologize.
Hello, folks. My name is Brad Hunt, and yes, I'm the player to be named later, which is why I'm not on the list up here. I represent the National Telecommunications Information Administration. So NTI is part of the Department of Commerce, specifically the Innovation Fund, the Public Supply Chain Wireless Innovation Fund. It's about $1.5 billion fund that is focused on the advancement of Open RAN technologies and research and development associated with those. It runs across the entire technological stack, everything from the radios themselves, even as far out as to the edge as the antennas, all the way back to the mothership and the core of the network and everything in between. We have recently released our second round of funding, or completed it. Those applications are in evaluation. Now we are in the process of building future rounds of funding that I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of course, but I'm certainly very interested in getting perspectives and ideas from the group here. I'm very happy to have been able to come up here. JD is my predecessor. He and I have worked closely over the course of the last 24 months or so, and I'm super happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Brad. So, actually, I guess JD needs the mic.
Down.
So, This time I'll do a proper introduction. JD Griffith is the managing director of ADAS's Next G Alliance. Prior to that, JD was chief technologist for the Public Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund, the $1.5 billion federal grant program to advance open, interoperable, and innovative radio access network solutions for 5G and beyond. JD also provides technical expertise in developing U.S. government telecom policy relating to 5G technology and open and interoperable networks. He frequently engages with international partners on the importance of open and interoperable networks, network security, and trusted telecom and supply chains. Prior to his role at NTIA, in the policy offices, JD was with the Institute for Telecommunication Services, where his work focused primarily on 5G system architecture standards and testing, and led the build-out of the ITS Communications Research and Innovation Network, which is NTIA's laboratory for testing communications networks for 5G and beyond. He's worked previously on issues related to the Internet of Things, smart agriculture, and V2X, representing NTIA and the US DOT at various international connected vehicle events. JD.
And I have slides.
Ah, yes. There we go.
Thank you, Mark. So I spent about 12 years at NTIA, and this is my first big foray back into the private sector. And so it's been at ADAS for about a month as the managing director of the ADAS Next G Alliance. A lot of exciting work is going on right now in 5G, but also in 6G. 3GPP is about to kick off in the fullest sense, their 6G standardization process in the spring of 2025. So even though we're still looking at probably a 2030, deployment date, that's still, the work is ongoing and ramping up fast. So I want to provide a little bit of an overview for the folks here at AraFest on what exactly the Next G Alliance does, and how this relates to the mission of ARA and precision agriculture. So the NGA was formed in late 2020 by ADAS to really kind of set the groundwork for North American leadership in the 6G space. February 2022, ADAS released the roadmap to 6G to help provide that North American vision. So ADAS is made up not just of US companies, but also we have a strong Canadian cohort as well. Since 2020, we've gone from, a handful, about 15 founding members, up to over 100 members today. And part of our foundational goals is, we got to set this agenda for private sector, academia, and government to collaborate together on how to make North America a leader for Next G technologies. And I view this in two senses. Leadership means two things. One, it means leadership in, technology development and how the US and Canada uses 6G. How do we make the most out of our networks? It'd be a travesty if we have these awesome, very capable networks and all we really use it for is, wow, I get my Netflix in 8K now. But how can we, support the economy, support agriculture, support logistics, support public safety, support everything from mining raw materials out of the ground to delivering finished products to the consumer? How can we support all aspects of our economy with 6G? And then the other side of this is going to be, how can the North America serve as an example globally? How can we export the technology developed in North America and the lessons learned to be a leading example for the rest of the world on how wireless connectivity can revolutionize your economy? And so we want to build this comprehensive model on North American 6G technology developments, R&D needs, standards goals, market readiness, and it's not here, but eventually commercial realization. It's really easy to have something ready for the market. It's another issue to have it commercially realized where the customers are happy as a successful technology and you have adoption increasing across the board. And then we really want to see that rapid commercialization across both domestic and global markets, because we can't, delay. Once it's ready, it needs to be, we need to be consistent and steadfast in how we roll out 6G services. So this rolls into several different stages of the process. A lot of it's the research that's been ongoing and still going on for 6G technology, everything from the radio access network and the physical layer through core network architectures. How do we develop and manufacture 6G equipment? What's going to need to change, especially when we talk about innovative topics like ambient IoT and batteryless devices? standards leadership. How do we ensure that, U.S. technology and North American technology makes it into standards organizations like 3GPP, so we can ensure that, these features that we develop that we think is going to have commercial success in the United States and in Canada can make it through into commercial products. But then we get into the market readiness. And I think, from my perspective, I'm sure if there's a standards engineer, they're about to throw a tomato at me. Getting it into standards is easy. It's a lot harder to get it into a realized commercial product. So that's one of the key areas that I really want to focus on with the Next G Alliance with myself at the helm, is we get the right technology into the standards, and then we're able to bring that technology out of the standards into commercial products, into the hands of folks developing applied applications for it, like in the Ara Lab, to companies like Collins, to companies like John Deere, companies like Contiva, so we can ensure that, we're realizing the full potential of 6G on the back end, not just going into what could be in standards. And so as we approach this market readiness and this commercial realization, that is going to be really important that we build this collaboration. And so this collaboration is really the key to success. We have a lot of foundational documents that lead the recommended priorities and actions that need to be done to build 6G readiness and 6G leadership. But we need to work on the 6G research aligned for what is really the key needs in North America. The North American economy is way different than what we see in Europe, what we see in Asia. I mean, we're two very large contiguous land masses. If you look at the United States and Canada, very similar economically, very similar culturally. A lot of the agriculture issues, especially for commodity crops, we see in the United States are the same in Canada, but it's different than many other parts of the world. So we really want to kind of lead the way there, but still be able to leverage those lessons learned that they can be adapted in other markets. So we also want to increase the velocity of 6G research collaboration across the ecosystem, not just with the telecom industry, maybe working interdisciplinary with the ag science industries, working with defense, working with all sorts of different verticals that are really important to the North American economy. And leverage this holistic approach so we can promote the new creations, new innovations in education, jobs, and addressing economic and societal needs. And so with all that, it just really boils down to, I know a lot of us I just figured out 5G. Why am I want to talk about 6G? A key thing right now is, I myself struggle with okay, how am I supposed to know what we're going to need in 2030? It is 2024, and I can barely figure out what I'm doing next week, let alone 6 years from now. So it is going to be tough, but there's a lot of lessons learned we can learn right now from 5G. What's worked well? What hasn't worked as well as we'd like? What was a feature that was in 5G that should be able to support smart agriculture, but never made it into a commercial product? Can we talk about why that was the case? Can we fix that going forward when we go into 6G? So I think the collaboration between the agriculture community and the telecom industry is going to be critical as we look to how we can modernize and really make precision agriculture happen going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, JD. So our next speaker in reverse alphabetical order is Scott Fox. Scott serves as the lead technical advisor to the Department of Defense, Office of the Undersecretary for Research and Development and Engineering, known as Future G at the Pentagon, where he leads the 5G and Cyber SME team. In this role, Scott provides strategic and technical business advice related to the DoD efforts to modernize our nation's warfighting capabilities, enhance national security, specifically leveraging and applying 5G and beyond advanced capabilities and solutions. Before that, Scott spent over 4 decades in key executive leadership positions across the wireless, telecommunications, and startup worlds, building successful companies, delivering high-quality, complex solutions in environments of rapid change. Scott's been the CTO for Bell South and Singular, chairman of the GSM Association, group president, Wireless Facilities, Inc., and lead consultant for FirstNet. He serves as a board member for over 30 public and private companies. Scott, you also have slides.
Why not?
I'm just reminding myself. I keep forgetting.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, all. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share with you some of the work that we're doing at DoD that's, we think, very relevant because we're really building on the work that you're doing here, right? So let me go back. Oops. We start at the beginning, right? So this slide I can do in 5 minutes or 1 hour. And so it's going to be 5 minutes, but it'll be uncomfortably fast, right? Likely. But I wanted to provide some background here, and I'd start with what motivates us to leverage commercial technology. And it starts simply with that military information exchange requirements have outpaced our capabilities to be able to execute on them, right? Especially focused on wireless communications. And fortunately, the global community has been stepping up over the last few decades and has built some tremendous capabilities, billions of dollars, billions of hours of intellectual property that we can leverage and build upon and really do the things that we need to. And so at Future G, we're focused on advancing, adopting, and adapting commercial wireless technology to create asymmetric warfighter advantage, right? The research that we build upon, is really meant to build the DoD capabilities and expertise, right? And we see the opportunity to leverage commercial technologies for rapidly increasing, cycle times, for time to market on solutions, the deep utilization of features and capabilities, quickly finding out where there's flaws, right? We'd like to do that in the commercial space, right? So. Or we want to do that very, very quickly, right? And so, as mentioned, I'm in Future G. I'm part of the Department of Defense, the OUSD. We're considered the Chief Technology Officer branch of the DoD. Let's see. I've already mentioned some of the DoD's innovation cycle times have been uncomfortably long, right? And when it's time to upgrade equipment, it's hard to justify it with advances in other capabilities. So leveraging commercial technology gives us the ability to dramatically increase feature velocity and leverage global economies of scale. And as a taxpayer, we think that that's important. I'm not going to cover this too much, but what similarities do we have with rural? We think there's a lot of rural in this picture, right? We operate in all of the domains, right? We operate subsurface, naval, surface, naval, land or terrestrial, space, air, and cyber, right? So we have some very demanding environments, and we have a lot of use cases. When you think about the DoD, think about many different use cases, from enterprise wireless, where we're providing 5G on a military base, and the spouses of our fighting men and women are going to the PX to buy supplies, and families are doing their business, to covert operations in foreign countries, right? And so there's a whole range of capabilities that we look at many buckets. Again, these are just, we've broken we've divided our focus into a variety of different areas. The one most relevant probably to this group and to your activities is up in the upper left here, the Resilient and Open Commercial Solutions, or we refer to as ROCs, right? I'll touch later on this Open Centralized Unit. It's an OCUDU, and where we're creating an open source CUDU for academia, for industry, for a whole range of reasons. I'll quickly cover this. We're focused off in the upper right on ubiquitous and secure instant access, and some of the key programs we're focused on there is RAN sharing. More on the expeditionary side, mostly the Marines and the fast-moving folks. We're doing a number of demonstrations of 5G capabilities with our NATO partners. And we're leveraging the 5G platform as a bridge between non-3GPP access technologies or military kind of tactical radios and the 5G network, and it's extraordinary. And we have integrated sensing and comms that we're leveraging on top of the commercial work that's been going on as well. I won't spend much time on this, but this covers the Open Central Unit, Distributed Unit. This is a program we've launched in collaboration with multiple other federal agencies, including NTIA, NSF, NIST, Department of Homeland Security. We are all about collaborating with our peers and other agencies. So we make sure we consider their requirements. We are able to leverage their know-how and knowledge and needs, but also we want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts so we can divide and conquer. And we've done a lot of that with NTIA, as you might have heard before. And so, again, maybe we can cover this in some of the questions. I want to keep basically we felt that we were doing many 5G experiments, large scale, small scale, often on open source software, but often feeling we were experimenting on top of experimental, fragile, not feature-rich platforms that varied in their performance. And so this effort is an attempt to really push beyond that and builds on a lot of the work that Larry had mentioned regarding Aethers and that effort there. The Microelectronics Commons, we're not specifically a part of it, but we fund it. And there are 4 hubs. These are very, very large microelectronics advanced manufacturing capabilities that are being brought to the U.S. And 4 of these hubs support wireless-related uses. And so a lot of our research is pointed towards eventual manufacturing at these hubs and is intended to leverage, as a pathway to get past from the innovation through the valley of death into products. We think that the ME Commons is a multi-billion-dollar investment by the federal government that we plan to leverage, and we hope that you guys are too. Just a couple of comments. Some key areas of focusing is leveraging commercial technology, specifically 3GPP. I mentioned we operate in all domains. It's quite challenging, but it exposes us to a broad variety of requirements. Zero trust architecture from a security perspective is core to what we're doing. And enhanced security and privacy are probably 2 things that we might take more seriously in many cases than the commercial industry. Having spent 42 years in the wireless commercial industry, many times, we're about mission and saving lives, and so security is much more important. Open RAN is very important to us, not just because of its modular nature, the ability to leverage COTS, virtualization of software, but specifically, in my opinion, because of the RIC, the RAN Intelligent Controller, and the ability to do, to add intelligence at the radio layer and be able to enhance and increase our feature velocity as we move into the future. Open source is a big mandate for us. SWAP, size, weight, power, and cost is what we strive for in many situations. AI/ML is being used extensively in communications networks today for a broad range of. I'm always amazed when I'm asked, what do you think about using AI in communication systems? We're doing it a lot. We have concerns like everyone about adversarial aspects of it, but we're pushing hard. GPS denied operations is important to us as well. Non-terrestrial networking, and particularly direct-to-device in the short term, to sensor networks, and it's obviously areas I'm sure you're looking at. We're pushing that hard, and we think it gets to the instantaneous and instant access, which is the holy grail for most fighting forces that are out there. Spectrum agility, we talk about the moonshot here and dynamic spectrum sharing. Well, on the battlefield, spectral awareness, spectral agility is, without it, there's no chance for survival, right? Autonomous systems, not just drones, but multi-domain capabilities, all orchestrated, is a big part of what we're doing. DIU has some active procurements underway in this regard in the Indo-PACOM region. And workforce development is one of the 4 pillars. And we are working hard to really, and we do a lot of outreach. We work with lots of universities. We work with lots of people from industry. Workforce development is core to me. And we do a lot of collaboration with that as well. I'm on the NSF Workforce Development Working Group, and we've invited them to join ours as well. And this is just closing, right? We're focusing on the things I just mentioned. Here's my contact information. I hope you corner me here. If not, this will be shared. Please call me. We'd love to hire you. We'd love to have you work with us. We'd love for you to share your knowledge. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. So our next panelist is joining us remotely. Martin Doxett has served in, his face just disappeared. Served in various roles and capacities at the Federal Communications Commission over the past 4 years. He's currently chief of the Electromagnetic Compatibility Division in the Office of Engineering and Technology. The EMC division is responsible for providing technical expertise on measurement and data collection related to broadband performance as part of FCC's broadband data collection and measuring Broadband America programs. EMC is also charged with performing technical analyses, including radio wave propagation and network performance studies to inform FCC policy decisions, and administering the FCC's experimental licensing and radio frequency exposure compliance programs and the Technological Advisory Council.
He was
So Martin, are you here?
that was right at the he's just rejoined.
There we go.
Okay.
So Martin's here. So
Can you hear me?
we can. Two things. First, you're dramatically outnumbered by people who are physically present. So please make liberal use of the hand raising option, and I'm going to recruit people who are not on the stage to wave your arms if it looks like we're ignoring Martin. Okay. Thanks, Martin. Please.
Yeah, I apologize. I have I guess a temporary WebEx application open and it closed on me twice. So I hope it doesn't happen again. But if it does, I will be right back. So yes, thank you for having me. And I apologize I couldn't join. I'm in between two trips right now, so I couldn't make a third one happen in time. So I'm glad to see everyone there in person, and I wish I could be there with you all. So from the FCC's perspective, we've acknowledged and continue to acknowledge that rural and small town Americans require access to 21st century communications tools and technologies to stay plugged in to the competitive global economy. Bringing these benefits of mobile broadband to rural America is one of the FCC's top priorities. The FCC pursues broadband policies to ensure that consumers in rural areas have access to basic telecommunications services and encourages deployment of advanced telecommunication services to rural communities. A few examples of what the FCC has been doing to solidify these objectives is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or RDOF, which is in the middle of dispersing up to $20.4 billion over the next 10 years to bring fixed broadband and voice services to millions of unserved homes and small businesses in rural America. The RDOF Phase 1 auction ended in November of 2020 and awarded $9.2 billion of this money to support 180 winning bidders, including telephone companies, cable operators, electric cooperatives, satellite operators, and fixed wireless providers. Winning bidders have committed to deploy broadband to more than 5.2 million homes and small businesses and census blocks that previously lacked broadband service. This is on top of the NTIA's Parallel BEAD program, which is planning on offering an additional $42 billion for high-speed internet access throughout the country, including rural America. The FCC also has a rural healthcare program that provides funding to eligible healthcare providers for telecommunications and broadband services necessary for the provision of healthcare. The goal of the program is to improve the quality of healthcare available to patients in rural communities by ensuring that eligible healthcare providers have access to telecommunications and broadband services that they need to deliver reliable and quality health.
I don't know if that was an intentional conclusion. Okay. Thanks, Martin. We'll come back to you. So our sixth panelist is Dr. Melvin Carter, who is the Director of Agricultural Systems Division and the Institute of Food Production and Sustainability at NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. NIFA is the U.S. Department of Agriculture's extramural grant funding agency for agricultural research, education, and extension programs. In this role, he provides national leadership and direction for NIFA's agricultural systems science and federalist systems programs. Dr. Carter works with university partners, other stakeholders, and customers to advance the mission of research, education, and extension programs in the agricultural sciences. Dr. Carter's division addresses human interaction between science, technology, and agriculture. Programs here integrate the biological, physical, environmental, and socioeconomical factors essential to successful production and viability in rural communities. Agricultural Systems Division also helps producers understand new technologies, new techniques, and assist them in taking advantage of opportunities to create and sustain agricultural enterprises. The division has a goal of improving economic opportunity and the quality of life for producers and consumers, while enhancing understanding and appreciation of the nation's agricultural systems. Melvin, would you mind hanging on and letting? I'm sorry. Okay. Martin, you got cut off, so.
I deeply apologize. I'm not sure what's happening, but it just closes out periodically. So anyway, I'm sorry. So the FCC's task force for reviewing the connectivity and technology needs of precision agriculture in the United States, or also known as the Precision Ag Connectivity Task Force, provides advice and recommendations for the FCC on how to assess and advance deployment of broadband internet access service on unserved agricultural land to promote precision agriculture. The task force work started in 2019 and continues with its next meeting scheduled for this September 18th, 2024. As far as some of the work that's closer to what I do in the commission at the Office of Engineering and Technology, we run the FCC's experimental licensing program that opens up opportunities to use spectrum for research and development, scientific measurement, product demonstrations, market trials, and many other applications. Included as part of the experimental licensing program are FCC innovation zones, of which several of the NSF power platforms, which were mentioned earlier, are already approved or are being considered for approval. The authorization as an FCC innovation zone allows for streamlined reporting requirements for experiments conducted within a specific pre-coordinated geographic area. So it's a great opportunity for rural universities and the like to continue to do a really interesting experimentation in these facilities. Additionally, the FCC has been working hard to offer other opportunities for spectrum access for various purposes, such as the CBRS or Citizens Broadband Radio Service Band in the 3550 to 37 megahertz band, expansion of spectrum bands for unlicensed use in 5925 to 7125 megahertz band, the 57 to 64 gigahertz band, TV white spaces between other services operating in the TV bands, above 95 gigahertz and more. Many of these bands have a higher tendency to be available in rural areas and can be leveraged for research or other new opportunities of spectrum use.
So I'll jump right in on that. I think Martin is a good example as to why you all are here today, to be honest. You know, I gave my spiel on Monday. I think everybody here, the first day, I think everyone is here from when I talked on Monday. Talked about two programs that really lay within my division that you all should relate to. One is agriculture systems technologies, which all of you all should be applying, and the other one was agriculture economics rural communities, which is where we do the social science of what you all are doing out in the community. As Mark stated, we fall up under what we call REE, which is research, education, and extension, meaning that a lot of the grants we fund are integrated, meaning that they may have a research component, but they must have an education and extension component, which is why we do social sciences. Because who's going to educate the people that are going to use the devices or whatever technology you come up with? It has to be someone in academia or someone that's very familiar with that. Also, when you go out into community, who's going to be talking to these people before this stuff arrives? Those are extension people, and sometimes they do the educational component as well. But I'll turn it, he left again, so I'll keep going. But under that, just understand that in those two programs, we fund about $60-some million a year in grant proposals that come through those programs. So really want you to be aware of that. And one thing in here, if you are a PD or a principal investigator and you haven't talked to NPLs at NIFA, then you're definitely doing something wrong. So how many people here are talking to NPLs at NIFA? So all of y'all are doing something wrong. So make sure that as you go, you get familiar with the programs there. Dial those NPLs up that are in the RFAs. They're not just there to critique, to bring your proposals through panel. They're also there to have discussion with, because you are our stakeholders. We have to build our priorities in there, and as you talk about what's emerging in your area, that helps them out when it comes to the RFA application when it comes back around the next go around for asking. So just make sure you're having that communication. Make sure you're willing to also work with us and come in and review proposals, because we definitely need the experts that are in these areas. So I turn it back over to Martin.
Thank you, and I will probably again. So I'll try to make this quick. Just two quick shout outs to things that the FCC have been involved in but aren't directly responsible for. One is the National Spectrum Strategy, which I know there's some component of this panel for education and workforce development. There's a pillar, an entire pillar in the strategy that acknowledges that a well-trained workforce to fill critical spectrum-related jobs across relevant sectors is essential to ensuring that the spectrum ecosystem remains effective, efficient, and responsive to the evolving needs of wireless ecosystem and the society at large. So this is an important collaborative effort among industry stakeholders, academia, and government entities to serve as a catalyst for the development of specialized expertise to set up long-term success and leadership in the spectrum domain, positioning the U.S. at the forefront of emerging wireless technologies and their associated benefits. Then also the National Standards Strategy on Critical and Emerging Technologies recognizes the critical role that academia and other research institutions have in providing subject matter experts and researchers to make essential contributions to standards development and provide important independent non-vendor perspectives. This.
Thank you very much.
All right.
The rural coverage is really good, but it's his home connection in Virginia.
I feel bad about this, but I think we're going to need to consider the possibility that Martin is only sort of with us. So thanks, Martin. Hey, I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and kick off with one question, and then hopefully others will jump in. But yesterday, several people, starting with you, Melvin, actually touched on the challenges of bridging gaps in technology development and deployment, sort of moving first from research to development and then to widespread adoption and community impact. So Melvin, you mentioned the transition from precision agriculture to precision farming, tailoring down to a specific farm or the field level, but you weren't the only person who brought this up. Ranbir and Shumik also pointed out that farmers are unlikely to deploy advanced networks without compelling applications and an impact on the bottom line. And those are challenges that pop up in all areas of research and development. Right? This is not specific to the agriculture world, but Hongwei pointed out that there may be situations here where there is a rural first advantage, things we can do better or more readily in rural communities. And then several of you represent organizations with explicit mandates to make sure we're not overlooking these communities. So I guess that's a lot of background, but the question is, what collaborations can we do that cross some of the organizations represented here, both on the stage and out in the room, that'll attack some of those challenges? So I'm going to point at Melvin first. You started this yesterday. So.
Yeah. Well, you hear the word in here, systems. So what really makes up a system? You're putting together something, but is that the end of the system? So I grew up in, as I say, the country. I grew up in rural Alabama. And I remember when cell phones first came out and I would be going home to visit my mom, and I knew if I got to a certain point, it was just going to shut out. And that happened. But, being in that part of the community, a lot of things used to shut out, because that was an underserved community. But now when I go back home, I remember that I was surrounded by soybean fields and knew the farmers that were doing that. And as technology evolved, those soybean fields disappeared. So when I talk about, we have mandates to be in those communities, that's the reason why, because some of those farmers are going to disappear because as we advance technology, they're not going to come on board with it. So we need to make sure that we're not creating a digital divide. And if we're creating a digital divide, more and more and more small and mid-sized farmers are going to do just that. They're going to disappear. So how do we bridge that gap? We have to make sure that as we build these systems, they're in the room in those conversations as well. Not just the scientists, not just the tech people, but those people that are going to have to buy into these systems. So are we having those conversations? Are we making sure they're included? Are the social scientists in these rooms right now to make sure that they're understanding the message they need to go out with and making sure they're doing the studies that they need to do to make sure that that digital divide doesn't happen? So when you talk about interdisciplinary teams, integrated teams, I think that as funding gets tighter and tighter with the government, we're funding those type interdisciplinary teams are really going to get that return on investment for the government. So really think about it that way. Make sure that you're including everyone in the conversation that's going to touch that system, that's going to need that system, and utilize that system to its best potential.
So I have a couple different ways, I think, to address the collaboration topic, and I'll try not to get on too many soapboxes in the process. I think, Melvin, what you said is, right on the money. I think, having that cross-collaboration interaction at a project level or initiative level is really important, and that end-user-focused objective development. I think there's a lot of, and I've seen this in telecom, I've seen this in other industries, we develop a lot of solutions looking for problems. We haven't really done a lot of going to the end user, asking what's the biggest issue for you for your industry? What's the biggest connectivity problem that you have? How can we work together to solve it? Now, not all data is good data. Sometimes I don't have any connectivity, and there's a lot of economic reasons why we're not to that point. But I do think this is where the interdisciplinary nature needs to come in. Some of these projects, especially when we talk about rural communities, we do need to bring in both the social sciences, but also economics and business as well. A lot of the economics in the telecom industry revolves around, number of users, user density, and then average revenue per user. And all this is based off of every device belongs to an individual person. When we start talking, especially sensor networks and IoT, I think average revenue per user is going to become the worst metric possible, because your revenue may go sky high, but because you're adding so many low cost, low data sensors to your network, your average revenue goes down. Or average revenue per user, because each one of those devices is considered a user. So there's a lot of the interdisciplinary aspects here, especially on the business side, that really need to be brought together. And I think that's going to be also, for facilitating adoption, going to be an important topic, because if you can't make the economic argument of, hey, making this investment is going to give you a 2x, 3x, 5x return on the back end over the next year, 3 years, 5 years, it's going to be really hard to argue, especially with farmers who may have tight budgets already. You ask for $100, they only have 10. That applies when you're asking them just to spend $100 on a nice to have. But also, many of these farmers who are on tight margins, when they need to, will drop $500,000 on a harvester they use 4 weeks out of the year. So it's important to understand why they do that. Is because there's a massive economic benefit for them to investing that capital. How can we make that argument for precision agriculture network, for precision farming? As we do this research, it also, we have to look at the entire life cycle. I really like the TRLs, the technology readiness levels that Hong Wei talked about yesterday. And a lot of the agencies here cover different chunks of that TRL spectrum. We don't have one agency that covers everything from 1 to 9. So it's important for not only researchers to look at how to kind of keep momentum moving as, we start off basic research, developing the inventions, developing the applications, and start looking how to develop and commercialize this product. Look at what agencies may be interested in funding. Maybe you start off with NSF, then move to NIFA or NTIA for downstream funding to help commercialize a product, but also engaging with commercial partners. I think, you need to have the agriculture community at the table, the ag services companies, along with the end users and the telecom industry. Because I know many telecom engineers that they think that how every industry works. They really don't. So hearing that straight from the end user and what the needs, priorities, and concerns are will be really helpful to advance precision agriculture.
I love the concept and love talking about collaboration, right? And at the DoD, I would say, one of our primary focuses when it comes to moving forward on a project is really digging deep on a dual use case, right? If it only works for the DoD, it's a much lower priority because it has much less potential for success. And so working with you to identify your issues, your problems, so we can relate to them and then pair up programs would be, I think, just conceptually a great way to go forward. Specifically, areas such as sensors, right? It would be, I think, a tremendous area for us. High resolution, AI-aided examination of high-resolution video. I'm not sure how much you're doing that here, but for us, it's, it can be what we call blue force protection, where we have high-resolution cameras detecting anomalies and knowing what's actually happening in the field, to high-resolution analysis of aircraft, to connected maintainers. So if you're doing things with high-resolution video to determine, the context of the soil or the nature of the weeds or whatever it might be, there might be an opportunity there. NTN is another, we think, big one in terms of hopefully over time cost-effective communications, especially at low data rates, and I think lots of other ideas. But we'd love to have these conversations.
Yeah, I'd like to add one last thing to that, and I like to keep things super simple. So I'm going to put it in super simple terms for everybody to understand. You want the path of least resistance. You want the fastest path to where you want to go. Find a way for someone to make money. It's literally that simple. You find a path for the commercial sector to make money by virtue of the research and development that you want to do. Your life will become infinitely easier. The resources that become available to you will expand dramatically, and the time that it'll take you to go from point A to point B will decrease dramatically. So I would encourage you, right, as you are contemplating areas for research and development, right, put that on the front burner, right? Ask yourself that question right up front. How does someone make money by doing this? And if you can't answer that question, or if it's, well, I don't know, we might be able to make it here, we might be able to make it there, that's going to be an uphill battle, right? But find a clear path to that commercialization and for someone to make money, you're on your way.
Maybe I'll add a little TRL 1 through 3 perspective to that. I don't disagree with that as a path to success if you happen to be in the place where that's feasible, and TRL 1 through 3, we're kind of in the precision agriculture business. We're trying to seed a number of things. We're not quite sure which ones will get to the point where the business case is relatively clear and you can drive things from that wheel. The thing that has struck me in just hearing all these comments is how much synergy there is in the goals and mission of each of our organizations, and also how many times everyone said it's industry, it's government, and it's academia. So to sit in a room where you're hearing all three of those being called upon as sort of having an incredibly important role is exciting. And I think the mission agencies are so valuable for the problem spaces, being able to elevate the real problems that are their constituents and that they're facing and trying to meet these missions. And that, feeds into the goals of, FCC, NTIA, with respect to connectivity everywhere. So we're really seeing all these things come together. And then, NextG Alliance, which is looking for the places where the money can be made, has to, I think many companies are realizing they need to help us with the seeding of research ideas, because there's just not enough for us to do it all, from the foundational science agencies. We just don't have the kind of resources that allow us to plant as many seeds as we'd like, so some of those things get to that point. So I'm just struck by how common our interests are in connectivity everywhere, compelling applications with very interesting characteristics to them that hook into economic development in the U.S., and then dual use.
So I sense that Dr. Peterson has a question, but I didn't know if Martin had something to say. Didn't want to leave him out, but I suspect.
I'm back and I'm trying a different version here, so hopefully, I apologize again for the interruptions. If at least it's maybe some entertainment for you before lunchtime. So. I just maybe underscoring some of the federal or interagency collaboration work. We have multiple memoranda of understanding and agreement with various federal agencies to include NSF and NTIA. And so we've got a lot of other collaboration going on. We have regular discussions with many of the research granting institutions, although we're not one ourselves, through the NIDR-D program and the wireless spectrum R&D program, the WIZARD as it's called. So I think it's not too surprising that there's a lot of synergy here, because we have collaboration and partnerships with other federal agencies on a regular basis.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you for waiting, Larry.
So, yeah, second the synergy point, but what I think we need to figure out is how to not fumble the handoff from 3 to 4. And I don't know how much this, where the closest overlap is, but to look for that opportunity to take the research, find that first early adopter. Maybe it starts to smell a little bit like commercial, and so maybe you have to back off, but not. I don't know, maybe who that's for, maybe Ellen. I'm not sure where the next handoff would be. Maybe it's to the USDA, but any thoughts on that?
Thanks, Larry. So, there is a new kid in town in the NSF. That's the TIP director at Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. And one of the reasons why TIP was created as the Chips and Science Act called for the creation of TIP. And it is attempting, I think, to be the leg of the relay race, that goes from NSF's real historical bread and butter into a bit further into demonstrations that hopefully help both identify areas for commercialization and perhaps push things over a barrier that they'd be ready to be picked up. So I think it's early days. It's early days for TIP. Some of you may be aware of a recent ideas lab that they ran called Breaking Low, intended to help catalyze ideas for demonstrating ultra low latency on using 5G technologies, understanding that was the sort of promise of 5G that didn't really come to pass. And so, what can be done creatively from existing products. But I also think that these test beds are a place where some of that can start to happen, or at least we can see where it would be what would be most promising to pull on.
How can we
make that more
institutionalize that, or make that a priority or first class, that it's a,
what do you think?
I don't know the answer.
I don't know whether you folks have thoughts on how we could do that better.
So I think, I'm going to take a step back and then I'm going to go forward again. One thing that I think is important, especially even with the TRL 1 through 3 research, and I actually picked this up during my government days taking a DoD contracting training, is, even when you're starting at TRL 1, at least have some semblance of what an end goal might be in mind. Even if this is long shot research, understanding who may be the interest groups, because that can go a long way early on to understanding what later success might look like. And so when you get to TRL 3 and you start looking at okay, what's the next step? Maybe it's through NSF TIP, maybe it's going through a more mission-focused agency like USDA or one of the 30,000 DoD R&D funding agencies. But then that really starts to help kind of make more of the argument here. And I think, Brad, put it in the simplest terms. If you can make money with it, you can have a lot of success. But I think another key thing that happens, and even working with industry, this is an issue that comes up. There's lots of great ideas and lots of innovative ideas, but it comes down to who's going to pay for it? Who is the target you're trying to woo here with your new technology? Is it the farmer? Is it the John Deeres of the world? Is it the Cargills? Is it the DoD? Is it the Lockheeds? Understanding where that's going, I think, can also help understand where to chart that path. Now, it doesn't necessarily institutionalize it into a process, but I think it can kind of help as you connect the dots.
I'm sorry, dominate here. Just one little tiny jump ahead. In agriculture, you do have outreach is a huge part of the university mission. So maybe there's an opportunity.
That was a point that I think Melvin made earlier, that I think we should all keep in mind the people who invented TRLs or came up with the terminology is NASA. They're a technology-focused organization. They stop when the thing works. That's what 9 is. There's a whole lot after 9. in terms of getting it to market, popularization, education, adoption, that we're not even talking about. But again, I'm going to just cheat as being the moderator. And
I will actually counter that as like, and we ran into this with the Innovation Fund, is TRLs depend on which agency you're talking to. And I would agree with like NASA, TRL 9 it works. When we were looking at using TRLs when we were at NTIA, it was TRL 9 was commercially deployed success. TRL 8 meant it was, TRL 7 and 8 is market readiness. It is available for sale. TRL 9 is, fully deployed, commonplace everywhere. It's the 3-point hitch.
So in my old days, it was something else to think about as well. Was a MRL, was a manufacturing readiness level. So, it may be a TRL, great, but if it's not meets a certain MRL, it doesn't go anywhere either.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, let's try to.
Can I piggyback on this part? Because I feel.
Can you do it quick? Because there was another question. I feel like we're only getting one question in the whole panel. So
I guess just on this TRL, right? I feel that there's actually the people dimension I want to probably invite us to think about, right? Especially when we look at rural broadband, rural communities who have all been talking about being left behind, what can we do about it, right? I think if you can find, I think this is where government can play a major role, actually, by having different agencies coming together, because typically different agencies fund different programs, right? Different set of people and communities. If we can somehow think about who can play some role in that different TLL, and also try to nurture that continuum of communities with a sharp rural focus, I think that's where we could probably start. One, kind of leverage the collective resources you can put together, but also nurture the communities who are going to drive those progress, having kind of provide that stimulus funding to nurture this new stream of innovation communities. Not just to think about, when we think about workforce development, not just to think about them as users, but think of them as innovators who can actually help bring, kind of help us to leverage this huge untapped resources we could think of.
Thanks, Howard. That's an important point. Okay.
Mark, can I jump on that just real quick, or do you want to move on? Because I think we need to look beyond technology too, right? I mean, because rural faces multiple problems beyond agriculture. 12 years ago, I worked on a program in South Carolina, and it was in support of a broadband initiative, but it wasn't really technology related. It was economically related. It was bringing together the communities that, say, the Department of Education for remote learning, remote education. It was the Department of Health around, remote health, the ability to eliminate or minimize trips to the emergency room by early detection. It was the power companies and their strives for green and load shedding and all of the things that they're attempting to do. None of them can basically afford the telecommunications link, right? So if you would partner with those, and I'm sure there's more, those were just the top 3 off my head right now, who share a desire to provide services but lack the economic drivers to provide the infrastructure, right? And I think the work that you've already done, putting out a network and bringing the community into it, probably a step in the right direction there. But look beyond the technology. You are not alone, right?
Thanks. Okay. Thanks for your patience.
Murat Torlak from NSF. I'm also a faculty member, like Alan and Hussein. We are rotators, come from universities, so we do have a lot of academic experience as well in terms of teaching courses. And most of our time, probably 40% or so, is spent on educating people. So it's part of workforce development. So my question is somewhat different from the research aspect of this. Also at NSF, I'm a Cognizant Program Director for all power platforms. So I heard a lot of research over the last 4 years, what these platforms can do, cannot do. One thing that they have struggled is finding research engineers who can actually work on development of certain things, in between. Research-wise, the PhD students, they're good at it. They spend 3-4 years with the advisors, so they come up with good research results. Undergraduates, they can involve maybe as an internship during summers and stuff like that. But the entire development requires more dedicated people. So I like to connect this to another experience. which is a drop in number of enrollments in graduate level courses typically geared towards wireless communication and networking. And so, I mean, some people say we are losing them to AI because there's lots of other options. So my question is that we talk about different gaps. Do you feel or do you observe a gap in terms of workforce development between PhDs and undergrads, where typically professional master degree students, because these people come and take 7, 8 courses, they specialize in certain things, and here I'm mostly referring to, of course, networking and wireless communication. From your vantage point, especially from industry or even from government, do you see sort of a need to fill that gap, if there's such a gap in your view? Sorry for the long question.
So I would say there's two gaps. There's the K-12 graduating students who decide to go into engineering versus other domains, whether it be like computer science, what their kind of goals are. I think there's a lot more we as a community can do, especially land-grant universities like Iowa State that do have a lot of engagement in communities through the extension programs to educate, especially high school students, on like what telecom actually is, what it means, the age-old question of the algebra class or the calculus class, like, when am I going to use this in the real world? Well, your cell phone uses this day in and day out 24/7 to help show, like, make telecom cool again. But then when you get into college, I think this is the other part where you talk about, transitioning from undergrad to graduate education. As someone who only has an undergraduate degree, it's an opportunity cost issue. I can, when I was graduating, it was like, okay, I could go to grad school, make 25, maybe 50K on a stipend, and then, have 2 to 4 years more school, or I can go to government, not even industry, but government, and make $76,000 a year. Oh, by the way, I also have student loans, so I can either delay paying them or start paying them immediately. So there's a huge opportunity cost issue that needs to be addressed. Now, is that necessarily solved by increase grad student stipends? I'm sure all the grad students here would love that. But I think also it's a case of how do we get what if someone decides to go to industry and then, works for a few years, like, wow, I really wish I could get my master's, wish I could get a PhD, but I also don't want to go backwards for 2 to 4 years. I'm making 100K, now I'm going to go to making my little stipend, and then go back to industry, and then I may have a, salary increase. How can we get more, early to early mid-level, to cross all the terms, engineers that can, go work in academic research while still maintaining, part-time, while still maintaining their relationships with their current employer. And how can we foster industry collaborations there, I think, is a huge opportunity, because we're going to run into this issue in industry as well. As much as I hate to say it, the average age of the standards engineer goes up every year. It doesn't balance out because there's not a huge influx. But there's a lot there that can be, how can we have better exchange for graduate education between industry and academia, and bridging some of those gaps, I think, will help.
I'm going to mention an NSF program that for the current students, this won't be relevant to you unless you happen to be an undergrad who graduates and goes and works. So SISE stood up a program called CS Grad for US a couple years ago, and the target audience is people who have been working, like you. You could apply for the program. Who finished a master's degree and are in industry and would now like to come back and get a graduate degree. I think the primary focus, if not the exclusive, is on getting a PhD, but it runs with with mentors to help people become prepared to enter a PhD program, to apply for PhD programs. It's it's one tool in the toolkit for the kind of thing that we're talking about. But it's definitely intended to try to recapture some people who, at the time they were finishing undergrad, had constraints like you're talking about. Now, it doesn't solve I'd like to keep a comfortable salary while I'm a graduate student problem. It does strike me that this is a little bit related. I mean, you connected this to research engineers, who we do pay better than we pay graduate students. And, you know, if there were an opportunity to be a research engineer while simultaneously in a PhD program where you're pulling your PhD projects out of the research engineer work that you're doing, I've seen that model. It takes hard work, but I think we're in a domain space where that is absolutely a possibility, right? So you'd probably leave your current employer, but maybe you'd get in a working, you know, in the university, a working situation where you're doing, you know, you can sort of mix being an employee as a research engineer with being a PhD student.
Okay, I am noting that it is now noon. I'm sorry. I've tried to be really good about wrapping up on time, and since we've reached, as a panel, the obvious conclusion that the correct thing to do is to increase graduate student stipends, I think we can take a moment to thank the panelists and break for lunch. Thanks very much.